itself.
Hi everybody, I'm John. The focus for me is first of all to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, Sunrise people. What a great idea, Sunrise people. And acknowledging the custodians who have allowed us to share this space. I'm a little bit upset that some of us didn't actually ask to share it, we just took it. But it's great to be here. The focus is also about these people who've got these great dreams. So I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. And that's me. Okay? And that's me when I'm about 2 and a bit. I can still remember the red pants. The focus is that we all are elements of our upbringing. Our whole focus on who we are comes from how we've grown up, what we've experienced. Next slide. So the focus is, I attended public schools. I'm from this area, grew up in Lismore and Lennox Head, live in Lennox. And it's interesting to note, next slide, that, you know, I ended up bowing before this guy, being carried in by my little finger in Cambridge Uni, and all of a sudden being seen as a master, which is probably a misnomer. You know, when someone says guru, it's a word for people who can't spell charlatan. So I'm not that, but I've had a lot of experience, and I want to share some of those experiences. I've come back here to bring what I've learned. And so that's not a bad idea. So next slide. You know, let's talk about learning. There's that model of let's just fill you full of knowledge. Or there's the Plato knowledge of Plato metaphor of a fire waiting to be kindled. Okay, and this is interesting because we go to the next slide and we can start to see all these things that happen inside heads. Okay, but that's not really learning, because learning is a social aspect. So we go to the next slide. It's all about how we collaborate, communicate, share. And this is why schools need to be at the heart of communities. You know, we've heard co-working. I'd like to call it co-learning. We're all still learning. You're all here. You've been listening to all this. The next slide. You know, what's the purpose of schooling? And what is quality? And here's a little thing that I'd like to talk to people about. Just 6 Lego bricks. Put them together in little ways, and there are 915 million different possible combinations. 915 million. So diversity is really important. Next slide. And you know, the fabric of a school, we've heard about the blank canvas, we've heard about the weaving as we go through this process. You know, the fabric is all about wefts and warps and how you bring them together with the right amount of tension and with the differences to create something that's really unique. Next slide. You know, so let's have a look at schools. Because put up your hand if you like school. You know, put up your hand if you think schools can be improved. There you go! So let's have a look at some of these things. Like there's a traditional school. Okay, I don't know what happened with that person on the ground. But let's go to the next slide. Okay, here's another school. This is probably the most famous primary school in the world and you don't know it. But you notice it's sponsored by Milo. This is Barack Obama's primary school in Jakarta. That's his school. And all of a sudden we've got a president. So remember, our upbringing creates things. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so how do we educate people? We're pretty good at it. You're in a big classroom right now, sorry. We sit them in a room so we can control them. Okay, next slide. And even now, we say, let's do 21st century learning. So we throw in lots of technology, and it's still really boring. Okay, so next slide. So here's a quiz, you know, you've been so patient with everybody. Okay, tell me, which ones there on that slide are prisons, and which ones are schools? Okay. All right, I'll tell you right now, because we haven't got much time, and I don't want to go over my 10 minutes, is number 2 is the only prison. That's true. Okay, next slide. You know, and here we are thinking that this is the quality of learning and education. There's a difference between a learner and a performer. And the focus we've all gone down is to create performers. Next slide. Do you see, thinking is different than knowing, and I do this quiz. Just think about this really quickly. In your educational experience, how many of you had a teacher who taught you to think, not to know things? How many? Now I'm going to start, okay? Put your hand up if you've got 10 or more in your head right now. Awesome. Watch what happens. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That is a sad indictment on education and schooling, because the average, whenever I do that, is 2. Think about it. So the next slide is, which one of these kids is going to be successful in school? That's rhetorical. I'm not going to tell you. You're right. He's right. That's my view. That's my perception. It is the middle one. I love the little boy who's just discerning. Yeah? Okay, next slide. You know, here we go. This is weird. Okay, we are all about content. And schools right now are about making sure we take tests. Now we've got so many people taking tests, we use what Professor Kelly invented as the lowest form of testing, a multiple choice quiz. We're going to put it online as well. And then we're going to say you're a result of how much you know, which is recall, which is the lowest order thinking skill. And then we're going to diagnose that, and we're going to go back and improve our content to make sure you get better at the NAPLAN. That's true. Next slide. You see, it's all about a teacher. Being smart in school is about a teacher saying, hey, I'm going to ask a question, and if you know what I know, you're smart. That's nuts. It's dumb. Okay, next slide. Here is the Gallup poll from 2015 with 500,000 kids in the US. I have fun at school, 28%. I find that a calling to change schools. 1 in 5 kids in 2012 in Australia said, I'm unhappy at school. 1 in 5. Next slide. How can we learn if we don't understand? It's about the multitude of thoughts and differences and appearances, feelings, everything that's inside us. Intelligence isn't about recall. Next slide. The focus is about how do we model and frame what we're trying to do. If you look here, emotional intelligence, EQ. Cognitive intelligence, IQ. Physical intelligence, PQ. And what I call the X factor, just because I don't watch television, so someone hasn't borrowed it, is the expressive. Now, when you think about this model, the internalized thinking of what you have right now, your inner voice, takes you through this whole lifetime, and you don't have to tell anyone, but it's in there. That's your spiritual. And that's made up about your emotional thinking and your cognitive understanding. How you show that, how you physically interact, and how you express yourself, that's the outward, the external, or the social side. Now when we start to look at what schools are focusing on, just click, that's testing. We're not meeting the needs of a holistic, whole education. Next slide. So, you know, perceptions and understandings are what it's all about, what I call vibes. You know, you get the vibe, values, interests, beliefs. All these things combine for us to become intelligent, interconnected beings. A collective. Next slide. Here's something really interesting, because we are all brought up, indoctrinated in the educational system. Okay, here's a quick quiz. If this dot represents today, in your head, how will you represent tomorrow? Okay, think, what would you do to represent tomorrow if a dot represents today?
Another dot.
Okay, next, click on the next slide, just click. 75% of Western cultures have another dot, have 2 dots, have a bigger dot. They did this with the Western Desert Aboriginals. 75% did this.
That's what I was going to.
Topographic, holistic, looking at it from above. Dot drawings. We don't. Most of you haven't even looked up. So we've got to change how we see things. We've got to take some risk, responsible risk. Next slide. You know, this is the Dalai Lama. And just as we take for granted the need to acquire proficiency in the basic academic subjects, I'm hopeful that a time will come when we can take it for granted that children will learn as part of their curriculum the indispensability of inner values, love, compassion, justice, and forgiveness. That's deep. That's deep learning. Learning isn't about outcomes. It's not about saying I've arrived somewhere. I know my tables. Learning is about building capacity, getting us all to develop and grow as people. Next slide. I love this quote from Hawkins. It's just, we're just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of an average star, but we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special. You know, this is an opportunity for us to really start to develop mindful, heartfelt, hands-on opportunities for our kids. As custodians, we are not here for us. We're here for them, and they are here for the next generation. Thank you.